Module 5 was all about effective unit planning, which essentially boils down to seeing the big picture. If we want our students to reach their learning goals and fulfill their academic potential, they must know what those goals are, and more importantly, all tasks and classroom activities selected and planned are specifically chosen to move students towards those goals. As my supervisor here at American International School of Niamey said once during our first staff meeting last year, if you aren't teaching to a standard, you shouldn't be teaching it. Therefore, from the outset of this module, I anticipated that it would be very helpful and applicable to my teaching here at American International School in Niamey. So, what are some things we learned these past 6 weeks? As I mentioned before, if we don't know what we're aiming for in class, we'll never know if we hit our mark. So, if we want our students to meet the standards, it's crucial we actually know what they mean. This can be done by unpacking the standards. Unpacking standards is basically deconstructing the standard to unveil the essential information and skills students need to know. This is first done by identifying the standard's big idea. This can be done by identifying all the key nouns in the standard. The next step is unpacking the standard is to identify how the students are expected to demonstrate this big idea. In other words, what skills are the students expected to demonstrate, or what medium or format are the students expected to express the big idea. Once unpacked and completely understood, we can begin planning out our instructional unit with an effective technique called backwards mapping. As the name suggests, backwards mapping begins at the end, whatever goals or desired learning standards we want the student to accomplish, then maps out a unit plan specifically and systematically designed to reach those goals. Therefore, whatever activities or assessments which are included in the unit plan should help students reach the desired goal. To demonstrate how backwards mapping works, I use an example standard from Arrow K-12 Science Performance Standards. These are standards used at my current school, American International School of Niamey. Once the basic foundation for the unit plan is laid down with backwards mapping, it's time to plan out each lesson in the unit. During our second week of this module, we began learning what elements should be in any good lesson, how to assess students to, again, ensure that they are kept on track to meeting their learning goals. Every lesson must have learning objectives, which are specifically tailored by the teacher to help guide students' progress towards the standards. Although standards and objectives could be easily and mistakenly perceived as being interchangeable, standards are the overall big picture towards meeting those standards. Every lesson should have daily objectives so students know exactly what they are aiming for during that lesson. These objectives can be delivered to students by using the popular SWABOT acronym, which stands for Students Will Be Able to. Personally, I prefer to use I can statements. That way, at the beginning of each lesson, I can call on students to ask them what they will be able to say after today's lesson. Regarding the daily objective, it's important that they are SMART. So specific, measurable, attainable for the students, relevant to the students, and targeted to their readiness level. One particular strategy I learned about that I found extremely helpful was the idea of integrating Bloom's taxonomy into the process of designing objectives. Providing objectives which span across the cognitive domain of Bloom's taxonomy is a great way to ensure all students, regardless of their readiness level, successfully meet their standards. I was able to employ the project-based learning technique last quarter with my own 10 through 12 life science class during their ecology unit. The school's French teacher came from an IB school before coming to AISM and was a passionate proponent of project-based learning. Back in the fall, she pitched the idea of life science and French class joining forces to teach students about the great work being done right here in Niger to protect the endangered Nigerian giraffe population. Within Regional Park W Heartland, less than an hour drive from our school, the American Wildlife Foundation is supporting the Association to Safeguard the Giraffes of Niger, or ASGN, and their efforts to conserve the remaining giraffes. Students got to research the Nigerian giraffes, its ecosystem, the causes for their endangerment, particularly humans' role in the decline of their population, and propose ways to help protect the remaining population. At the end of this unit, the class was supposed to take a field trip to Park W, but due to security issues, they had to simply visit the Park W office in Niamey. Opportunities to learn in informal settings outside the classroom, called crossover learning, serves as an effective means for linking educational content to the rest of the world. Building connections between content and real world experience deepens and enriches our learning experiences for all students involved. Although I wasn't able to directly observe teachers at my own school due to semester exam testing this past week, I did get a chance to observe our school's high school math teacher during another module while he was teaching his flipped classroom model in place. Granted, it was a mathematics class and I am currently teaching life science. I can definitely see how well the flip model could work in a life science classroom as well. When observing Matt at work, the benefits to the flipped classroom were evident from the start. Students had the entire class period to actually do math as opposed to simply listen to lectures about math. He was able to interact with the students in small groups or one on one since he didn't have to worry about addressing the entire class in a lecture like format. He was constantly engaging students while helping them through working through problems. During my interview with Matt about his approach to unit planning, he admitted that at first preparing a class for the flip model takes a lot of time and effort, but in the long run it saves innumerable hours of planning and preparation while simultaneously leaving much more time in class for student interaction and engagement. Overall, Matt raised a lot of valid points, both supporting lesson planning and unit planning, as well as arguing against their absolute necessity. Like all aspects of teaching, I feel a lot of lesson planning and unit planning should be contingent on the teacher while considering the age level of the students, the subject being taught, the size of the class, the interests of the students, the learning styles of students, the readiness level of all the students, experience of the teacher's teaching style, and many more factors as well. There is no black and white answer for any question regarding education, so it makes sense the topic of unit planning is no exception. Good arguments can be made for and against formal traditional lesson planning, and I believe the effectiveness and value of unit planning is mostly based on the individual teacher creating the unit plans. Personally, I have benefited a lot from unit planning. I'm the type of person who excels with structure or organization, and I find it a critical component for my own teaching. As with all things, however, to each his own. Like all pedagogical approaches, there are some drawbacks to this model and other innovative models like it. First, integrating innovative techniques into any classroom can be very time consuming and taxing for even the most seasoned professionals. It may take hours, even days, to plan out an instructional unit emphasizing innovation. Not all teachers have such luxury. Another downfall of most innovative strategies is that they assume all students will be highly motivated and respond favorably to these great learning opportunities afforded to them in the classroom. Let's be honest, there are some of those students who are absolutely obstinate to anything school related. Also, many of the project based approaches rely heavily on students' time management skills and work ethic outside the class. Again, ideally, students would work arduously every evening with great alacrity, but alas, this isn't always the case. Many of the techniques provided in this binder also depend greatly on the teacher's resources. Although I'm extremely fortunate to work at a school in which funding rarely is a barrier, this definitely isn't the norm.